Jamal Mashburn lashes out at Kentucky. They look more like kittens than wildcats. Did the guy really go too far with his criticism? Let's take a closer look. First, subscribe to the channel to receive more Wildcats news. Jamal Mashburn's criticism landed like a ton of bricks at the Kentucky Training Center, and it couldn't have been otherwise. When one of the greatest players in the program's history, an icon who carries real weight when he speaks, says live on TNT that the Wildcats look more like kittens than wildcats, it's not just an opinion. It's a reality check. And, in a way, a public call to action. Mashburn, All-American, SEC Player of the Year, and former All-NBA player, knows better than most the standard expected when wearing blue. He was formed within that requirement, built an entire career on it, and that's why his words resonate so deeply. For him, Kentucky's start to the season, with 5 games, 2 losses, and an inconsistent performance, is far below the minimum required for a roster that carries the label of the most expensive in college basketball. The criticism is not superficial. He points out clear technical flaws, lack of shooting, perimeter defense failures, non-existent rebounds, collective disconnection. These are basic problems that, when not resolved, make real opponents seem like insurmountable mountains. Mashburn gave them a 3 on a panic scale and left a harsh phrase hanging in the air, which has already become a headline in its own right. Asterisk, they look more like kittens than wildcats. Asterisk. And, of course, he didn't fail to touch on the issue that puts pressure on the entire community. The $22 million invested in NIL. For him, this amount demands the presence of unquestionable stars, leaders capable of taking control of the locker room, something that, according to Mashburn, has not yet appeared. The absence of this alpha forces Mark Pope to assume a leadership burden that should be shared with the roster. And this imbalance, in the former star's view, is one of the driving forces behind the turbulent start. Next to him, at the TNT table, Bruce Pearl was even more surgical and severe. For the recently retired Auburn coach, Kentucky has too much talent for the wrong roles. They spent money on starting players on reserves, said Pearl, pointing to a locker room where everyone sees themselves as protagonists, but few are willing to accept roles. There is no harmony, no focus, no definition. And according to him, this problem is greater than 3 on the panic scale. But there is an important difference between diagnosis and sentence. And this Kentucky has not yet been sentenced to anything. The truth is that, however loud the criticism may be, and it is, the answer will not come from microphones, round tables, or contract numbers. It can only come from the court. That's where Mark Pope and his players need to clench their fists, shut out the noise, and prove they are more than the headlines surrounding them. That's where this team needs to rediscover its identity, define its leaders, and show that, despite the initial stumble, it still has the caliber to compete with North Carolina, Gonzaga, Indiana, and St. John's, all waiting in December. If Mashburn demanded results, it's because he believes in the program's potential. If Pearl criticized, it's because he knows the weight Kentucky carries. And if Pope remains firm, it's because he understands that true rebuilds go through turbulence. Now, the moment demands a response. A strong, mature, and urgent response. The Wildcats have no control over what is said about them, but they have absolute control over how they play from now on. And that's exactly what will decide whether this start to the season will be remembered as the harbinger of collapse or the starting point of a turnaround. Mark Pope not only refutes concerns about the Kentucky locker room, but also broadens the discussion to address a wider and deeper issue: the human tendency to simplify stories and label behaviors dichotomously. In a world that relentlessly seeks to classify everything into clear categories, selfish or altruistic, united or fragmented, he argues that there are far more nuances in relationships and team dynamics than appear at first glance. We want to label people as black and white. We want to say they're extremely selfish people and other altruistic people who are dedicated to the team, said Pope, highlighting how unfair this can be. That's a great injustice to everyone, because there's nothing real about it. The coach argues that often what seems like selfishness on the court, especially in moments of pressure, can actually be the reflection of a player desperate to help their team. A forced throw, a risky individual play, or even a glaring error can be misinterpreted when viewed through the simplistic lens of right or wrong. In Pope's view, these behaviors often stem from genuine intentions, albeit poorly executed. What frequently happens is that a player might appear to be making what we would call a selfish play because he desperately wants to help the team. And that, in fact, happens more often. This perspective carries with it a subtle but important critique of modern sports culture, where instant analysis and quick judgments often obscure the complexity of human situations. Pope acknowledges that conversations about internal issues, conflicts, or lack of chemistry are inevitable, especially in a program of Kentucky's size and prestige. It's fun because it's fun. We need topics to talk about, and we need to chat, but this is a really good group of guys who really care about each other and are putting a lot of effort to do that for each other, he said. This statement reflects a mature understanding of how the spectacle of college sports fuels speculation and rumors, even when these don't correspond to reality. However, Pope isn't asking for leniency or trying to evade criticism. He's redefining the dialogue, inviting fans, analysts, and observers to look beyond easy labels and consider the human context behind the attitudes on and off the court. The coach emphasizes that the process of building a team is exactly that, a process. There's no magic switch that, once flipped, makes all the players function perfectly like a well-oiled machine. Mutual love, respect, and trust are earned gradually, through daily sacrifices and shared experiences. But sometimes it manifests in a way that's exactly the opposite of what you're looking for, Pope added, acknowledging that, amidst the turbulence, gestures of unity can be misinterpreted as signs of disunity. This speech reveals Pope's philosophy as a leader. He doesn't just manage a basketball team, but he cares for a group of young athletes who are learning to navigate external pressures while trying to find their place in the competitive world of college sports. His optimism is not naive. It's grounded in a conviction that this group has the potential to grow and overcome obstacles. He doesn't deny that there are challenges to face. After all, recent defeats are clear evidence of that. But he insists that the core of these challenges isn't in the locker room, but rather in on-court execution and collective team evolution. By addressing concerns about the internal environment with such calm and depth, Pope not only protects his players from hasty judgment, but also offers a valuable lesson on the importance of looking beyond appearances. He reiterates that this is a special group, still in the discovery phase, but with a solid foundation of camaraderie and determination. This is a really good group of guys who really care about each other and are working hard to do this for each other. Perhaps, then, Kentucky's problem isn't an identity or chemistry crisis, but rather the unrealistic expectation that young teams should operate like perfect machines from the start. What remains is to trust the process, and Pope, with his clear vision and thoughtful words, seems to be the right guide to lead this journey. Leave your comment.